Hello, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin, and this is McDuff Lives, and it's our monthly meeting with our good friend Hrvoje Moríc. Hrvoje, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yourself?
I'm good. I see that you are now called the Croat, and I hadn't got the news yet, but as for today, I will humbly address you as the Croat.
Well, I mean, technically, that's a translation of my name, so it's not incorrect, you know. So
Oh,
Hrvoje is the Croatia in Croatian is said Hrvatska. So Hrvoje, Hrvatska, it's kind of like, my name is my country.
okay. And what about Moríc or Moríc?
That's I guess the tribe. I don't know. It's yeah, the tribe probably.
Okay, your people go way back then, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's like over a millennia. Is it something like that?
Yeah, yeah. It's a fascinating country, one that we study very little in our school here in the U.S. But of course, recently with the breakup of Yugoslavia, and then before that, the horrors of World War II, a very important country to keep in mind. And, part of the crazy mix of our geopolitics here at the end of 2024, for sure. But boy, things are popping in the Middle East now, or as some people are now calling it, Southwest Asia. Um, it's popping, and things that were never predicted are happening. I mean, I guess we were talking about there's going to be a black swan event between the election and the inauguration, and man, this disappearance of the nation of Syria into what appears to be the beginning of a regional conflict has got to be a real shakeup for everybody. Your thoughts on that?
Well, this was predicted. I just posted my weekly analysis on my Substack, and I always go back to things like I mentioned. Generally, General Wesley Clark in 2007 gave a
Right.
speech about how in 2001, so that's 23 years ago, he was told Syria would be taken out, and that's like that prophecy, that plan has come to fruition. And I would always show that clip to my students in the high school and university where I taught history and political science, politics. And then there was a second clip from Gaddafi, I think 2008 at the Arab League. This was powerful, and I only learned about this through one of my students. My student, students are always giving presentations, and somehow this student, this was probably back like 2010, 11, 12, used this clip, and I was blown away, and I just added it to my what do you call a repertoire or inventory. And Gaddafi in that Arab League speech in 2008 was saying, if we don't come together, us Arabs, uh, basically they're going to come after us. And sure enough, 3 years later, Gaddafi was dead, right? And in that video, the camera panned and it panned to Assad, and he was laughing, almost like he was like laughing at Gaddafi. What he like he didn't believe it. I don't
Mhm.
think Assad is laughing right now. Um, and sort of my reaction to what happened with Syria is, I always tend to say it's not surprising. Like, you could have expected this, but it's shocking. Like when it happens, as you mentioned, like the speed with which it happened. I thought Assad would have been backed by. I had the inkling that maybe Russia and China were getting stronger, and they
Mhm.
would back up Assad. But from it's in my analysis, I think Putin and that China and Russia are weak. Still, they threw Assad to the dogs. Same thing they did with Gaddafi. I referenced Francis Boyle's book, Destroying Libya and World Order. I may have mentioned it before, where he said that Russia and China did not veto uh, the U.S.'s UN resolution to bomb Libya, through NATO, because they were too weak, Russia and China. And now it just seems like a replay. And I included, there's this must listen speech from a fellow Croat, Nicolo Soldo. He writes a Substack called Fisted by Foucault, which is popular. I think he's Canadian Croatian. We know some of the same people. And he gave a 10-minute speech in MCC Brussels. And I have to agree with him. He basically says that the globalist American empire it's here to stay. It's winning. I have that impression that he was talking about IMF and Bretton Woods. We brought that up before. BRICS. They have not created any alternative to Bretton Woods. They've talked about BRICS payment. There's nothing. Like there's just talk. It's all hot air. And basically, I view it the globalist American empire and their vassals. They're winning. They are winning, if you ask me. That's the cold hard truth.
To a lot of people, it looks like Israel is behind it. It's the Greater Israel Project, and that's what Netanyahu talks about. Is going back to the when God gave all this land to the ancient Hebrews, that they want it back, and they're going to take it. Is the conquering of Syria part of the Greater Israel plan?
Well, yeah, most definitely. But I noted in my report there are multiple factions. So Turkey, it's Greater Turkey, is at play, right? Erdogan was basically saying, "Yeah, we're can't with the rebel." He was giving his support to the rebels heading to Damascus. So there's a Greater Turkey at play. There's a Greater Israel at play, and maybe some other agendas. Something that I thought was also interesting that both my past guests, Rurik Skywalker and Nikola Mikovic, mentioned that another one of the reasons that Putin probably didn't care to support Assad anymore was, Matt Bracken, who I also cited, is former veteran who does good analysis. For the longest time, there has been this Turkey-Qatar pipeline that they wanted to push through Syria to feed Europe. And Russia was I think one of their interests was keeping Assad to prevent construction of that pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
But now after like Nord Stream and all that, it's kind of like a moot point. So that kind of makes sense. Like they have less, Russia's weak. Number one, they're weak because of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And this pipeline, their pipelines get blown up like Nord Stream and all that. And so it's kind of like a lost cause. So they're like, to hell with it, And so, but going back to Israel, I was just thinking, I want to make the point that my fear is that there's a deception. I think what the devil is doing, he's trying to say, look what the Bible people are doing. The Bible is false. What Israel is doing with Greater Israel. And in my view, it's like that has nothing to do with Old Testament or New Testament. It's like saying the Church of Satan, look what they're doing. Christians are bad. And it's like, what are you guys doing? So Israel today is apostate. They've rejected Christ. They've rejected the Bible. And so they're acting, how would you say, AWOL, right? What they're doing with Greater Israel. And yeah, they're expanding into Lebanon, Syria. So they're going to take, I think, slices of Syria, Lebanon, and who knows what else. And I'm sure there are other, interests here also. And I think this seems, if we extrapolate Wesley Clark, he said Lebanon, he said Syria, he said Iran. And it's interesting. This is in the interim between Biden leaving and Trump, and this is almost like this is the, what do you call it, the entree, like when you sit at a meal, it's just the entree, like the appetizer.
Appetizer.
And they're getting the ground ready for the main dish, which is Iran. And even I forget his Shahid Bolson. I don't know if you know Shahid Bolson. He's got a huge channel called Middle Nation, I think, on Telegram and YouTube, like hundreds of thousands. He exploded over the last year. He's a intriguing figure. He does interesting analysis, but even he, who's, I think he's an American who converted to Islam and he lives in Germany or something. Even he, I listened to him yesterday, was forcing to admit that like even the current Iranian regime needs to change, that it might go. And so you're seeing a lot of people who, even Pepe Escobar, I read his latest op-ed, and he's detecting which way the wind is blowing. And so he's toned down his multipolarista rhetoric, and then there's people talking about the axis of resistance. I don't really see much of an axis of resistance.
I had that conversation with Harley Schlanger last week at this time, and I was saying to him, I don't see how are you going to have an alternate currency in countries that have already hocked all their assets to the World Bank. And I mean, where are you going to get the security interests that are going to finance the trade? It's just where is it? And it's not there.
Well, Niccolo Soldo, who I mentioned, he said that the Bretton Woods, the globalist American empire system, is so deeply entrenched. It would take decades and decades to do something else. And he says you basically you have to hand it to the globalist, to the gay globalist American empire. I play with that with geopolitics and empire. So when it's a globalist American empire that's like a meme among the right alternative media, GAE. The same thing I play on geopolitics and empire, GAE. But Nicolas Soldo says that whatever you think of the globalist American empire, again, we're not saying that we like it, but they are focused, right? And they're organized, and they can get stuff done, brute force. And he referred to BRICS and multipolarity as like herding cats. I think he's got a point.
Yeah.
It's like herding cats, all these different countries. It's just like a loose affiliation. There's no integrated system. Meanwhile, you've got NATO, you've got EU,
Yeah. Who's going to stop Ursula von der Leyen?
That was the other news. I forgot to drop that in my analysis, but they were trying to take her to court recently. Some EU figure or EU journalist or French journalist or politician was trying to, I think he initiated a case against her, and the EU courts like delayed it.
Yeah.
And Rob Roos, I think he's the MEP in Netherlands, or I think he said it's probably sabotaged. So it's like these people are untouchable, And Lindsey Graham, I mean, I was shocked when I saw that video a week ago. Lindsey Graham was like, he openly says, like, the ICC was not created for America and Israel,
Yeah. But that reminds me of my of the point that I think needs to be resonated, and that is that the United Nations was not created for America and Israel, and in that the United Nations was created and operates on the principle that winning territory by military force is against international law. Well, who's winning territory by military force right now in the Golan Heights? And is anybody objecting at the UN? No. The rules don't apply.
No, UN is like INCSOC, it's Airstrip 1, Airstrip, Planet Airstrip, it's again, it's from its inception. It was created by these theosophic, Satanist, occult, esoteric, Masonic, occultocracy, one world orders dudes, as this Orwellian construct. Same thing for the EU, for the UN, for NATO, OECD. I was reading yesterday. I didn't include it in my analysis, but I wrote, our OECD is another. A lot of these organizations, when you're building this world government, there's all these different agencies, and now they're saying OECD needs to get bigger and integrate all of the world's countries, and they want like a global tax and all this crazy stuff, and make sure there's no loopholes, so no one can sort of escape their global totalitarian rules. And so it's always been sort of INCSOC.
Yeah, INCSOC, of course, the reference to the 1984, and and the going back to Gaddafi. Gaddafi was creating that gold currency that was going to compete with the dollar. And a lot of people say that was his great sin, along with developing water courses and abilities to irrigate and to become actually a self-sufficient, thriving economy without the need of Western finance or military support. And that, when he starts creating his own currency, that's when things go bad. And a number of people pointed out that also happens in other places where somebody gets the idea of having an independent currency. I remember reading about what happened in Australia under the administration of a man named Jeff Whitlam, in which they were forced to abandon their protective policy, in which the Australian dollar was supposedly kept within Australia to invest in Australian projects and build an internal economy. And that was, I mean, that he was thrown out, and that the whole idea of any currency competing with the dollar, I think, is now clearly one of the real touchy points. And then the other point I wanted to get back to was that the same back in 1971, when you mentioned Bretton Woods, and everybody says, "Oh, we've gone off of the Bretton Woods standard," because of Nixon and George P. Shultz doing this horrible thing of taking the dollar away from convertibility to gold, taking it off the gold standard and turning it into fiat currency. Well, are they now being vindicated because the fiat currency is winning?
Yeah, and I mean what you mentioned with Gaddafi earlier. When I used to teach courses, I would use all these. I would find these amazing primary sources. Like I feel like I taught how you were supposed to be taught, like showing Wesley Clark videos and this Gaddafi. And when we talked on this issue, there are the State Department emails that were released, tens of thousands, which included Hillary Clinton's emails. Right, there was one email from her lawyer. I don't know if it was Max Blumenthal's father. Was it Sidney Blumenthal? Um, and in this email, it said to Hillary that Gaddafi's got, I don't know how many billions of gold and silver and
Mhm.
oil. And it was basically, you read between the lines. It's like wink, wink. Look, he's got all this oil and gold and silver. And it's kind of like, let's take it. And someone just reposted a clip, I think Michael Tracy, of Assad interview he gave maybe a year or two ago, or it could have been with the first Trump administration, saying that Assad was saying it doesn't matter. Trump was put in by the deep state. Assad says that there's a deep state infrastructure,
Mhm.
and the guy is just the front man. He does what they tell him, and he's like, we can't make a deal. With the person of Trump, he might be nice, but he's going to do what the deep state tells him to do. This is what Assad was saying, and he says the deep state only has puppets. And that's why Assad said, like, we're not, he actually says to the tune, we're not puppets. We can't deal with them because they want to make us puppets. And so it seems like Assad held out for as long as possible. But I guess your last point was, yeah, the fiat system. And I think maybe they're advancing it. Now they're going to try to push us to this Bitcoin stuff. And I mentioned that as well. That I don't know what exactly is going on, but something is going on. Michael Saylor, who is embedded within the deep state. I mean, come on, like so many people, in my opinion, are being deceived. You've got Trump, deep state MAGA, backed by Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, all DARPA boys.
Yeah.
And then you've got Michael Saylor. Someone once called him technocracy's general. My colleague Parallel Mike just pointed out, MicroStrategy deals with there was on their own website, it says MicroStrategy Intelligence, and then they're associated with the entire Department of Defense, all that stuff. And this guy recently came out, and he was saying, what did he say? Like, we're gonna boost the price of Bitcoin or something. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Saylor, let's see what he said. He says, dump your gold, sell all the US gold, and buy Bitcoin. Then the trade is free. You will demonetize the entire gold asset class, and our enemies hold gold in their banks, so their assets would go to zero. Our assets would go to $100 trillion. And like, they've got some agenda here. Catherine Austin Fitz says, like, I feel like what they're trying to do is Bretton Woods 3 or 4, to continue the next phase. The first phase was gold, the second phase was oil, and I guess now is it digital gold, Bitcoin. So I could see them doing what he says, demonetizing gold, so the rest of the world is sort of left holding the bag as the West, globalist American empire, speeds into this new global system, and they will have the advantage because they've done it first. Or, as Catherine Austin Fitts says, it might be a scam where they will pump up Bitcoin. It's 100,000 now, maybe it gets 200, 300, 4 or 5, who knows. And then when no one's noticing, they will swap it, sell the Bitcoin, buy assets, companies and stuff, and then it'll collapse and everyone will be left holding the virtual
Pump
digital
and dump,
bag.
man. It's a pump
But
and
but
dump.
either one is not good either. So it's either that pump and dump, or somehow they managed to pull off this heist and demonetize gold and make Bitcoin digital gold and part of the new system. I just this morning, Russian Deputy State Duma said Russia now wants to make Bitcoin a strategic reserve. So something is brewing.
Everything isn't all connected. Oh my. Oh. But I remember J.P. Morgan said that gold is money. Everything else is credit. That's what he said.
But I wonder what he'd say though today.
Yeah, really. Money is whatever they say it is. Yeah. This is worth $100,000. Here, take this Tesla. Yeah, but and I'm so glad that you're there to criticize the incoming Trump people, and I just don't think that there's enough fear and trepidation of the totalitarian nature of this administration. When you look at, and why aren't people worried about all these satellites that are going up there? I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and all of them are available for military purposes whenever the government or the deep state decides they want to use them. And the power of satellites, I mean, that's like giving the enemy the high ground. If they're the enemy, they got it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of those satellites, I included in my latest analysis this piece on, I call it DARPA, Facebook, Meta. They keep changing their name. First it was DARPA, LifeLog, and then it was Facebook, and now it's Meta. And Meta, Facebook, DARPA, Zuckerberg, blah, whatever. They're about to build their own proprietary, world-spanning subsea cable. And you look at the map, and you look at a map of the world with the U.S., here or whatever side people are viewing on, and it's a W. So the cable is going to go from Virginia Beach to South Africa, up to India, down to Australia, and then back up towards Washington State. And it says that this new major fiber optic subsea cable extending around the world, it's a 40,000 kilometer plus project costing more than 10 billion, and it would give Meta a dedicated pipe for data traffic around the world. It'd be owned wholly by Meta itself. It would put them in the same category as Google, and it says it would give them first dibs in capacity to support traffic on its own properties. And it says there's a more pragmatic impetus for these investments. Tech companies, rather than telecoms carriers, traditional builders and owners of these cables, want to have more direct ownership of the pipes needed to deliver content, advertising, and more to users around the world. So I just see that you got Musk taking care of inner space, cyberspace, outer space. You've got Zuck taking care of the sea. It's like it's a pincer attack, and they're building out the algorithm ghetto infrastructure because internet for everyone, which means surveillance, which means digital IDs, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And people have seen the examples of in China where there's cameras everywhere, and they can identify you as a human just from the quality cameras, and then they put your your little ID number on your face, so that when you're walking around, they can say, "Oh, this is number B73694, walking over to the grocery store," and everybody can be followed by these technical means. And of course, we could spend all day talking about thought police and go further with that theme. But there's a number of other things I wanted to touch on. And the next
You,
one, if
if
go
you could
ahead.
before leaving that, I just had to bring up two more stories related to the digital ghetto. What's going on in Sri Lanka and Bhutan just blew my mind. The latest report, I said, biometric update is really a gold mine. And in the story out of Sri Lanka, the government says that that for now they don't want to focus on raising taxes. They want to focus on getting everyone on what I'm calling the digital gulag farm, getting basically all the cattle tagged with digital
Mhm.
ID. And it says by linking various systems, by linking various systems like the land registry, immigration, banking, a digital ID would allow the inland revenue to track financial activities more efficiently, helping identify who should pay taxes. Again, this is similar to my experience from a month ago where I couldn't get my bank debit card renewed here in Mexico because I can only do it now with digital ID. And in Bhutan, basically, if you read the article, I said they want to AIify, Bitcoinify, digital IDify, CBDCify, blockchainify everything. Their sovereign wealth fund has created a national carbon registry. Um, for carbon credits, they've created the Bhutan verse. So it's like a metaverse for Bhutan. They literally call it Bhutan verse. And it says this is all put together by the royal government of Bhutan and the United Nations. And then it says Ripple XRP, the third now largest crypto, is assisting the Royal Monetary Authority of Bhutan in piloting its CBDC. And so when you read stuff like that, you realize, boy, what's going on, So, anyways,
And yeah, that's right. And it will happen here. The people. That's one of my favorite Frank Zappa tunes. It can't happen here. It can't happen here. Believe me, my dear, it can't happen here. Right. I'm telling you, my dear, it can't happen here. And the smiling face of Ingsoc says, "Don't worry, it can't happen here." Um, but you also made a comment, and I noted with some alarm the comments of Peter Hotez, the vaccine guy, about what's waiting for us on January 21st, the day after Trump gets inaugurated, and Bobby Kennedy's not going to be able to handle it. He's not ready. Uh, Tell us about Peter Hotez, and tell me why he comes out with such a bizarre statement. It sounds like a threat.
yeah, it sounded like a threat, but what I try to do every week, whether on my podcast or in my weekly analysis for paid subscribers only, is to see if there's a trend forming, like a trend line. The Syria issue was the big deal, the Bitcoin stuff, and then this Peter Hotez bird flu stuff. And it wasn't just him. So I picked up a few other signals, a series of articles in my scavenging of the multiverse interwebs. And I found a few more to sort of piece together with what Psycho Peter Hotez said. It was just the eeriest thing at MSNBC. He came out, he's like, starting January 21st,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be all these concerns with like H5N1 and bird flu. I'm like, it's like a deja vu with COVID. It's so Orwellian because it's like by him saying that, he himself is admitting that it's all a scam. Like we can make up bird flu's fears whenever we want. Just pull them out of a hat. It's not like some organic, oh, something happened here. It's like, hey, January 21st. It's like a political, it's a weapon. And then I found from New York Times, November 26th, this op-ed by forget his name now, but he's some academic in California. He said he co-ran Operation Warp Speed, and now he's worried about the high likelihood of a bird flu pandemic, and he wants mandatory testing for milk on farms to prevent human-to-human transmission. And then you read Mother Jones, this liberal globalist publication, saying, with the title of an article just a couple days ago, saying avian flu could define Trump's second presidency. That like matches with Peter Hotez. So you got Peter Hotez saying January 21st, bird flu, Trump. Mother Jones saying it could define Trump's presidency. NIH just a couple days ago put out an article saying single mutation in H5N1 influenza surface protein could enable easier human infection. And so you can sort of see, like the storm clouds are forming. And I called it like Operation Warp Speed 2.0, the bird flu edition. And so I would not put it past them to, and you can see the focus now is food this time. And a lot of people have talking, the first COVID was the countermeasures, right? The digital infrastructure. Now they're talking about farms and dairy and meat and cows. And so you can kind of see that what they're doing.
Yeah, taking control of the food supply might be part of it, and then forcing us to eat whatever they produce. And also fear, and that goes back to your comments about Bhutan and the making sure that everybody gets a digital ID. Well, maybe something in the JABs can accomplish that, and if we get people scared enough, they'll go out and get more of those JABs. So, the idea that they want everybody to have some mark of the beast in them, a little 666 chip in their wrist or something, is so compelling to me. I think that is really driving them. Once they've got everybody under their thumb, so to speak, then they can completely use us any way they want to.
Yeah, although I'm still not convinced that they have injected. There's all this talk of nano stuff that was injected into people. I'm not saying it's not possible. Again, I'm open to a lot of these things, but I think maybe it's exaggerated. There was a post. I would agree more with this one. Barely Bruised Books on X. Barely Book says it wasn't the jab that introduced the Web3 quantum economy. And he's referencing WEF. So World Economic Forum itself talks about quantum economy. When this is not QAnon rubbish, but Barely Bruised Book says it wasn't the jab that introduced the Web3 quantum economy. It was the crypto lovers who all support the WEF. And again, that's been my thesis. Bitcoin was created by them. Ethereum, XRP, Ripple, and all this other stuff. Maybe some of these others weren't created by them, but their goal was always to, as they were created, to what do you call it, hijack them. And so I think it's more the crypto space where all these people are unwittingly getting rich and getting loving crypto and building the system for them. And when you mention they may do implants, but they won't even have to. It's like download the digital ID on your smartphone, or once you give the biometrics, you won't need an implant. Again, they just read your face or your palm. And so they can deny you access without an implant. Like the camera sees your face coming and you go to a government office or supermarket. It'll probably be to enter the supermarket, the camera has to scan your face to make sure you're approved. If you're a dissident, the door won't open for you, so you don't even need an implant. But yeah, that seems to be the direction that we're going. And some good news on the meat. Last week I included it was a good podcast from someone in the industry saying that consumers are buying a lot of animal protein, dairy and meat, and so it won't be, the globalists in that front have work also cut out for them. So
yeah, well, I'll be buying my protein from plants and without the middle person or the middle animal, as you might say. But I understand. I think the idea of preserving farming is crucial, and we're losing it to the big Bill Gates land buys and all the big ag and all that. So just another way of taking our power away. If we can feed ourselves without government intervention, then we get to do a lot of other stuff that we couldn't do if we had to depend upon the government and pleasing the government in our social media and our comments and everything else we do. The MAGA people are, there's still what 80, 90 million MAGA voters out there that are expecting a return to U.S. sovereignty, to individual rights, to the ability to, control your own body and to have a rational understanding of things before the government can force you to accept a treatment. Let's just call it a treatment. Uh, are they all going to be disappointed now? And that gets back to your comment about Assad and Assad saying, well, I can't deal with Trump because he's just a puppet. He might say one thing one day, but then say something different another day. It's hard to understand, when you look back and you mentioned warp speed and how, Trump had his program to speed everything up so that and number of theories about why that was, but there's clearly a difference of opinion between the Faucis and the Trump people that has continued to this day. And the Fauci people, including Peter Hotez, are still, vilified by a lot of the MAGA people. And but again, if Trump is just part of the scenery, then why is Peter Hotez so upset about, and why do we think that something horrible will happen in order to take Trump down by having another, surprise pandemic?
I guess it'd be two reasons. I mean, they've got this machine with all these moving parts, the NIH, the Wellcome Trust, the WA, all these WHOs, these Gates, the MAGA movement. So they do have to make the machine move, right? And so they do have to create the scare or bird flu. Then they have to bring in the policies. Then they have to push Trump to implement it or force him, like game theory into, great game theory is a wonderful thing to study. They have to then force him through the labyrinth. So, it still has to be applied and implemented. So that'd be one, I guess, factor. And maybe the other part of it is the show. It's like WWE. You got to have for the audience. It's like the Truman Show. You got to give them something, and I've just been getting more disappointed. I thought, maybe centuries ago things were more organic in these struggles between empires, but it just seems like in the last century where globalism is just reaching its apex, that's everything is so fake. Like this rivalry between Russia and Hitler was built up by them, Soviet Union was built up by them, China was built
Yeah.
up by them. I'm like, this is I just hit, when I play a board game, I'm like a nerd in the sense. Whenever I play a board game or a game, I don't want any cheating. I do not cheat. I want like the game to be the best game ever, the most honest game that the other player will give it their all. I'll give it my all, and we'll see who wins authentically, organically. That's like I'm like that. Whether it's a video game or a board game, like let's just see the honest best of all players. But in geopolitics and the grand chessboard, it's kind of like it's all fake. It's like it's depressing, you know.
Yeah, and that's the only hope left to me is well, let's not even bring up China, but the only hope to me is Putin really an agent for a sovereign Russia, or is he just playing his part as well?
You know, I sometimes I think things are even there are other complexities that we're not discussing or aware of. There are things that when I listened to speeches recently with Putin or interviews or with other world leaders, and I'm just Assad. When you saw Assad's palace sacked, and Assad is now in Moscow. I would just be thinking, if I was in a room with someone like Assad, I'd be like, tell me some secrets. Tell me the secrets. What's really give me some, because I'm the things that Assad knows, or a Putin, of all these different factions behind the scenes and interests and networks. And yeah, I feel that Putin is not on our side. But I mean, there could come a moment in history. This has happened in history where someone decides to break out of the mold, right, and take agency into their own hands. Doesn't happen so often. Could still happen. I think people like Putin also have to make the calculation that it's like with a calculation with Assad. He went to Russia. He may have sensed that his regime was weak, and it was the end, and it was time to go. And so,
Now, getting back to that point, no, now that the oil can flow through Syria into Turkey and Europe, um, what, where does Russia get its money from? Nord Stream's gone. Europe doesn't need them anymore if this new pipeline through Turkey goes through, and it doesn't look good.
I mean, they've pivoted to the east. So far, India is taking a lot of energy, and China. Just last week, I mentioned that in my analysis. It went online. This new Russia, China. What is it? Where is it? China's largest single pipe natural gas transmission project, the China Russia East Route natural gas pipeline, with full operation of this 5,000 plus kilometer natural gas pipeline. Its annual transmission capacity is set to be raised to a peak of 38 billion cubic meters. So that would benefit about 450 million people along its route. And so, for now, it's got things like India and China, but it's almost like they're a lifeline, for Russia. What we were saying earlier, the globalist American empire for now is winning, and it's more like Russia is just what's the word? It's carving out its own little space where it is, and anything can happen between China and Russia at some future point. So
When Russia committed to the war in Ukraine, that might have been their downfall in terms of projecting power elsewhere in the world. I can't help but think if they hadn't committed so much of their military power to Ukraine and then lost so many of their soldiers in that horrible conflict, that they would have been in a position to keep Assad on his throne substantially longer, if not indefinitely. And they've also lost an important naval port, the port of Tartus on the Mediterranean. Now, where are all their ships gonna hang out? And are they going to have to retreat to the Black Sea, or do they have another base that they can support their navy from in the Mediterranean? It seems like it's a bigger loss than they're willing to talk about.
And I think of past examples of everyone says, Paul Craig Robertson and others, that Russia could have achieved victory in Ukraine if it acted swiftly.
Yeah,
You think of the 6-day war with Israel. Israel acted swiftly. Boom. Bada bing, bada boom.
yeah,
Everything's done. Or in the case of the Yugoslav war, look, I've got it right behind me. End NATO terrorism. Not a fan of NATO, and I'm sure a lot of the war was instigated by the globalist American empire, the breakup of Yugoslavia. But still, in the very end, 94, 95, Operation Storm, Oluya, which was NATO backed, it was to kick the Serbs out, finally, out of Croatia. And, it was done quickly. They were kicked out. End of war, and so those types of actions, I think, are the ones that win. And so what was Russia doing? Were they playing into the globalists' hands? Was it their second Afghanistan? Was it, or more likely, special oligarchic interests between East and West. And, someone said in the comments, Brightmore Dinosaur says same could be said of U.S. NATO's failure in Ukraine. America no longer feared. Again, I'm not so sure, because I read comments just yesterday on X saying that, what did Orwell say? The war is not meant to be won. So we might, if we're thinking logically, we think U.S. and EU are failing in Ukraine. But what if their objectives are completely something else and they're actually winning? You know what I'm saying? It's like they're sucking dry the treasuries of the West, money laundering, depopulating, spreading fear, rearranging things in Europe. And I think there's in some ways succeeding. For everyday people, we're losing. They don't care about us, but for them, they could be winning. And they often say how war is the pretext for furthering regional integration. So they're using the crisis that they've created of Ukraine to further advance European integration. So they're not, they have a plan for the European Union. It's, if you look at a meter, maybe it's like 60, 70%, 80% integrated, but they still don't have an EU army. And they themselves have said in their papers that war is the best way to push integration. And so I think, we could look at it in different ways, but I could see them, the globalists, in their mind, could be succeeding the way Ukraine is currently going.
Oh, it certainly makes sense. Now, what's going to happen when Trump becomes the president and he says to Europe, says, you guys aren't paying for NATO. Why don't you cough up some money and then we'll stay in NATO. But if you don't put up, then we're going to shut up. We're going to leave. And is Europe really? I mean, sounds like from people like Mark Rutte, the current head of NATO, that Europe is ready. Europe is fine. Yeah. We don't need the Yankees anymore. We can take on Russia, and we can, we'll put Zelensky in the NATO no matter what Putin says.
But
Europe is broke. So what's going on?
But doesn't it prove my point? If U.S. does that, that's just going to push them to create the EU army, which was the goal, right? For European Union, one EU's ECB currency, euro, one EU army. And so it's like they're really slick. Trump was like, I'm going to pull out of NATO. I'm like, that's actually a globalist move, because now you're creating a supranational EU army. He came out the other day. What did he say? He said in an interview like a day or two ago, in my reading of what he said, he's promoting North American Union. He said that Mexico and Canada should be made states if they are going to continue being subsidized by the U.S. And then if you just kind of break that down, in the past, he's talked about freedom cities for 15-minute cities. He's talked about digital ID biometrics to deal with the border migration issue. Now he's saying, let's make Canada and Mexico a state. So my reading is they just alter the terminology for the constituency. This time it's the conservative MAGA crowd who are all up in arms about, they're a bit, maybe we can say xenophobic or nationalist and patriot and conservative. And it's like, we'll add Canada and Mexico as states. That's kind of like nationalist lingo to denationalize the U.S. and create North American Union. So, in the past, when you had like a Bill Clinton or an Obama, they even under Bush, they have these North American summits for North American integration. But what Trump said is it's just like the conservative way of saying North American Union. So,
yeah, we've got our woke left, and now we've got our woke right.
Right, that's it.
And believers, or the suckers born every minute. That's the population of this country at this point. I think we were a lot smarter in the 19th century, and we had a lot closer ties to our roots in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the victories won for freedom over the course of that century. But the destruction of our education has been almost thorough, and our people don't understand hardly anything about history anymore, and so we're very, very vulnerable, very vulnerable. Um, we haven't talked about Great Britain, and I think, to me, that I follow, as probably many people have, the Venetian theory of how, there was the rich people that when Rome fell, they went and hid in the lagoon of Venice and built their wealth up there, and then they created this economy based upon slave trading and galley slaves and usury, and created this very, very wealthy oligarchy that's run by a doge. And the word doge comes very current when you think of Elon Musk's choice of his title. But that then goes to Amsterdam and then into London and becomes the city of London and the power of the British financial system, which then comes over to Wall Street as a result of World War II. But it's the same empire running thing. And so when we call things, the U.S. empire or the what you call it, the global American empire, I think we're not giving credit where credit is due. I think that it's still the ancient empire that has flown from one city to another in order to maintain its hegemony, and finds itself simply parked in Manhattan right now because it's well, we've got the guns, and we've but in other words, I think it's worth pointing out that it's not the American people that have built this monster, that this monster has existed for hundreds of years and it has taken us over, and what could be more explicit than the coup d'etat when they killed President Kennedy. And what's been going on since then is there's been the government behind the scenes with puppetry being exhibited, as Assad said, to people of the United States, whether we're MAGA people or Bernie bros or whatever we are, we're all sitting here watching a puppet show. That ancient empire, do you subscribe to that theory?
It's interesting you bring that up. I've been thinking about at some future point if I would like to write a book. I like writing when there's time, but I'm the kind of person, I don't want to force it just to write it, because when you force anything, you realize you're not doing it for the right reasons. You've got to be like my creation of this podcast, which I've been doing for 12 years. I was doing it moonlighting, not for I had a full-time job. I was just doing, there was something in me pushing me to stay up late, edit and do this work. And like that's the kind of thing that you want to harness to create whatever it is you're creating, whether it's a book or a podcast. And so the theme though that I would like to write on is to merge my biblical worldview with geopolitics and the study of globalism, and do it in a academic with good sources. Because you'll see books put out by alt media people, and they're done in a very conspiracy theory way, like with very poor sources, with wacky theories. And I'm like, you want to have it well formatted with good sources. And just to what you were saying, I was actually thinking, like, what would I write about? Even from a biblical worldview, it talks about this beast, towards the end of history, these beasts, and it talks about the book of Daniel, the statue figure, and how the two legs break up, which are made of iron, and that's Rome, right? And you can see the schism around, I think, 1054, when the Eastern and Rome broke up into East and West. And then you study the secular history. It's like Britain was founded by Romans. So it's kind of like the Roman Empire. It didn't go away. It just altered, put on a new skin. Roman Empire. I think I think you're right. What you say, it's Roman Empire, and then British Empire, and then these other various European empires.
Yeah,
And then
don't skip Venice though. Venice is
no,
very
right. I'm including that as
yeah,
it's this
Roman.
one blob, Venice and Roman, and then Britain, and then America.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing still, which then would match with Bible prophecy when it talks about. So if you're looking at it from a secular perspective, this Roman Babylon Empire, which has just gone to Europe and Britain and America, and the Bible speaks the same way of it. It says that it would split into two, the two legs, east and west, Rome, and then you'll have the end of history is the 10 toes, which are iron mixed with clay, and they're going to attempt to create this world empire, and ultimately it will collapse and crumble and fall. Yeah, so I think you're right, and I think the biblical and secular worldview match there, and I think, and so I would like to investigate that angle more and trace that history of Venice and Rome and Dutch Empire, Spanish and British and American, and then see if we can extrapolate where we might be headed.
Well, I think bringing the Bible into this discussion is sometimes a volatile idea. There's many different ways to read these passages, such as the book of Revelation, and it's interesting that we might be able to look at it as prophecy. I know a lot of people do believe it is prophecy, and I don't mean to offend anyone by offering my opinion that it was not really prophecy, that it was really just somebody describing the world that they saw in as colored as camouflage language as they could, so that they didn't get hung upside down by the Roman centurions. But that is the historicity of the Bible is a fascinating thing. And I did a show about a month ago on what they call the Schofield Bible, and I don't know if you ever looked into that, but to me, that is the British influence on American Christianity, trying to get American Protestants to look at the world thinking that the Bible aligns with what the British policy is. And that, of course, was a show I did to open the conversation. I'd love to talk to you about the Schofield Bible if we can do that some other time. But these issues are very, very deep, and I like the idea of making the journey on an academic question of, can you map out the prophecies of the Bible or into current history and prediction. It's a lot of people, I think, have probably attempted that. I love to read the Bible, and I'm just saying that it's possible that it could be read not as prophecy.
My point is that that's just me. This is me. I'm a Bible geopolitics guy. People should accept that and know where I'm coming from. It's like, you do you, that guy does that guy. And I've had a couple of guests, Mies by John, for example. He's this Dutchman who lives in Costa Rica. He wrote a book, you should maybe have him on, that tries to trace this same thing. And they're all good exercises. None of us are going to get it 100%.
Right.
But they're all very worthy thought experience. So I'll read and he's not a Christian. I think he actually thinks that the Bible was invented by elites. And so, but this is my point. I'll read his book and I'll interview him and I'll look at it from his angle. And then, this is my angle, except, take it or leave it. Your angle is your angle. And so I'm just coming at it from my vantage point. We'll all meet in the middle. And I forget the other thing and the Schofield thing, when I read the Bible, I never read Schofield or dispensationalism or nothing like that. I just read the Bible organically and came to my own conclusions. So I have nothing to do with Darby and Schofield. But I would like, given that it's being talked about more and more, to actually purchase the Schofield book and read the commentary for myself, because I would wager that most of the people now that are banging on about this have not actually, fully read the Schofield stuff and then compared that stuff with sort of the organic version of the Bible. But I also think when it comes to prophecy and talk about the Rothschilds and the Zionist interests, that I just view prophecy as something a lot of people lately in alternative media, a lot of them who are New Agey, anti-Christian, New Agey occults, theosophic, are saying, like David Icke just published an article the other day, saying a tweet saying that the elites today are creating the prophecy. And I just always viewed the inverse. Like, God knows the future. He's like, this is what's going to happen. And even if the prophecy had never been published, I think this is my point. If the prophecies were never published of the Bible, they were kept in the closet, in the cave somewhere, and no one knew about these prophecies, I think the same thing that we're seeing would have happened. That's my sort of view. It's a supernatural thing. But anyways.
And I'm all with you on the supernatural thing, and that there's God knows stuff that we couldn't possibly know, and that should give us comfort. But I also want to just cry out here as we close out 2024, with the plea, God help us, because it looks like humanity is taking, is really, really taking a whole lot of hits, and it's frightening from many perspectives, that we are becoming dominated by that technocratic state that was dreamed of by the Fabians in the 1880s, and has been the life work of people like Bertrand Russell and all of these elite people that think that they're so much smarter than everybody else, that they get to take charge and control the world and put us all into categories, number us, and bend, fold, and mutilate as they will. It doesn't look very promising for individual freedom right now, but as you say, anything can happen, and I'm here. I'm here for the ride. I want to see the whole game play out.
Well, I think we couldn't have said it better. I fully back you up when you say, God help us. That's it. And I closed out my analysis yesterday citing these two stories. One was from Canada, a mayor in Ontario, Harold McQuaker, who refused to honor the satanic LGBTQ plus transgender Pride Month. So imagine, he didn't want to honor it. It's like in the old, again, you read in the Bible when you have to bow down to Moloch or the king. Or if you don't, you're going to be thrown into the furnace or Caesar, or get your head cut off. And this is happening now. It's like, bow down to the rainbow flag. And Mayor Harold is like, no. And what they did was they garnished his bank account. He refused to pay. So the rainbow fascists went into his bank account using the law and took $5,000. And you look at a photo of the guy, the mayor Harold, he's smiling with sunglasses. I think that's the attitude, to just be chipper and just say no to Babylon with a smile on your face. I'm not going to honor your rainbow god. Raid my bank account for $5,000. I don't care. And then there was a football player whose name was Mark Guehi. They forced the football team to wear a rainbow armband. He's a Christian, and he wrote over the armband, Jesus, or I love Jesus. And that's just another example of, just in the chipper way, just say no to Babylon. So for me, like that's my optimism or joy going forward, is how many times and in how many ways can I just say no to Babylon? So.
All right. Well, I think we've identified Babylon, and the empire continues, but we will continue.
And we'll continue striking back.
Yes, that's right. Power to the people, and God help us. Thanks again, Hervarier. Bye, everybody.